Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. Today, I'm delighted we're going to be speaking to Carolin Botterill, a 52-year-old mum of three who became an accidental ultra runner. During this podcast, we're going to learn more about Carolin, how she got into running, what she learned from coming last in an ultra and why it didn't matter, how she trained and prepared for the Ice Ultra, as well as running the Peru Jungle Ultra 4 times. We also discuss mental health and why her mantra is just keep moving forward. I'm delighted we're going to be speaking to Carolin Botterill. I hope I'm saying your surname right. I always end up sort of butchering it. Is that a French surname?
No, I believe it's British.
Oh, amazing. I need to do it with a British accent then. So Botterill, yeah. I need to say it with more confidence.
I think they do like Botterill.
Botterill.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. So Carolin, where are you based at the moment?
I'm based in Calgary, Canada.
Fabulous. Have you always lived there?
I have. I was born here. I've lived my whole life here.
Oh, it must be a stunning part of the world to grow up.
It is.
What was growing up like for you? Did you come from a big family?
I have two siblings. We all sort of did sports growing up, and my parents ran around driving us here and there. It was just your average kid growing up in the 70s.
Now, your website is titled The Accidental Ultra Runner, and I love the title of that because I don't know how anyone can accidentally become an ultra runner. But before we get into more of that detail, how would you introduce yourself for people who maybe haven't heard about you?
Well, I like to think that I'm just an ordinary person out there doing some extraordinary things. I really did sort of fall into ultra running and extreme distance sports. I never was athletic growing up. I never planned on doing anything like this. If you had asked me 10 years ago if I was going to be doing anything like this, I would have said, no, don't be crazy.
So what was the turning point then? What happened in your life to make you take up running?
Well, what happened was I had 3 children in less than 5 years. I was very overweight. I was unhappy with how I looked and how I felt. And I realized that wasn't the kind of mother that I wanted to be, wasn't the kind of person I wanted to be. So I first started running as a way to lose weight. And then it just kind of snowballed after that.
So, having 3 children in the space of 5 years, obviously incredibly demanding on your time.
Yes.
How did it start for you? Were you taking the children out in like a running buggy, or were you managing to squeeze out some time on your own?
I both. Mainly, I would wait till my husband got home from work and then go after he got home. I was a stay-home mom, so I was at home with the kids. So yeah, there were times when I took them out in the running buggy, but mostly when I first started out, I was just sort of squeezing in time when my husband was around and could be staying with the kids.
Did you have any help or support when you first started, or was it just something that you were driven to do, or did you have friends you were going out with? Did you decide to join a running club? How did you know where to start?
Well, I didn't really know where to start. In fact, when I first started, I didn't even tell anybody that I was going for a run because it seemed really ridiculous for me to be doing that. So one sort of Saturday morning, I got up and I told my husband I was going for a walk when really I had it in my mind that I was going to run. And I went out the door and I ran for 2 minutes and thought I was absolutely going to die. And it just carried on after that. I just sort of gradually built it up, and then I signed up for a race, and that was it.
Do you know what? That is what it's all about, though. It's starting off really, really small and breaking it down, because I think people forget how difficult it is to even sort of run a mile or run for a couple of minutes if you haven't done any exercise for a while. So how long was it, since you started running before you booked in your first race?
It was probably a year before I registered for my first race, which happened to be a marathon.
I was expecting a 5K.
No, go big or go home. It was a marathon, and I trained all the way up for the marathon, and then sort of pretty soon before the marathon happened, I got injured, so I wasn't even able to run it. But that just put the bug in my brain, and as soon as I was recovered, I signed up for another marathon, and I was able to run that one.
When you were out there starting running from, absolute zero, how long was it before you got the bug, or how long was it before you started to notice either the benefits, either in your body or your mind?
It really wasn't very long. It was very, very hard at first because I was quite overweight, and I didn't have the proper shoes, and I didn't have the proper bra, and I didn't have anything proper. So as soon as I sort of figured out that I needed those things, it did get easier, and I just kept plugging away. I had one moment. There's a large hill that's about just over a kilometer from my house, and probably about 6 months after I ran, I had this little mini victory where I could run all the way from my house and up to the top of the hill without stopping. And that's when it just sort of all clicked in for me that day. I still remember standing at the top of the hill that day, sort of doing a victory dance. And after that, it was really, really empowering for me to keep going.
And it's so important to actually celebrate those mini victories. And I love what you said, where it just clicked. And it can take time, that's 6 months to build up to it, getting up that hill, getting to the top, knowing that you could do it. I mean, it must have had sort of knock-on consequences to other areas of your life. I mean, how was your confidence at that point?
Well, I've never had a very good body image. So by then I had sort of lost a fair amount of weight because I had changed my diet, and I felt good. I was feeling good. And I felt strong. So yeah, my confidence was definitely building as I was getting stronger and smaller and everything. It definitely was a confidence boost.
And what did your husband say, and what did your friends say? Were they supportive about your new running?
I didn't really tell my friends. It was something I was doing for me. So I didn't really advertise it. My husband was very supportive. I think he thought I was a little nuts to begin with, but he was supportive because he could see that it was important to me to make those changes in my life. And, happy wife, happy life. So he was very supportive. My family was very supportive as well. When my friends finally did figure out what I was up to, they were supportive too. I don't have a lot of close friends, but the ones I have are great, and they think I'm a little nuts, but they're always happy to cheer me on.
Sometimes it's quality, not quantity.
Absolutely.
So let's go back to your marathon then.
Okay.
An incredible thing to go and do. You gave yourself a year. Now I know you said you got injured just before your marathon. Did you end up walking that marathon, or did you postpone it? What happened there?
I had to just postpone it. I had a stress fracture in my foot, so I had to put everything on hold for a couple of months. But I registered for it the following year and completed it the following year as my first race.
Talk us through the race. How did it go?
It didn't really go as planned. I went out a little too fast. I had a little bit of stomach issues. It took me quite a bit longer than I had planned on taking, but I got it done. And that was the big thing, was I finished it. Because if you had asked me a couple of years before, would you ever run a marathon? I would have been like, no, are you nuts? No way.
And can I just ask, how old were you when you ran your first marathon?
I think I was 39.
39, fabulous. And how old are you now?
I'm 52.
52, amazing. So I know we've got some incredible races that you've done in between since you started running.
I have.
So
Yeah.
you done your first marathon at 39, absolutely fantastic. Why or when did you decide that you wanted to go further and go after your first ultra?
Well, I don't really think I decided that. That's sort of why it's accidental. After I did that first marathon, I decided that I was going to try a triathlon. I was a swimmer as a child, so I could swim. I had my 20-year-old mountain bike. And so I signed up for my first triathlon, which was a sprint. And I went and I did it on my old mountain bike. And I just had so much fun that I signed up for another one the next week. And then it just sort of grew after that. And, I went all the way up and I've done several Ironman distances. And after that, I went, oh, I should try something new. And I started trail running, which led to the ultra marathons.
Oh my goodness, there's so much stuff in there. I suppose I want to quickly talk about some of the Ironmans that you've done as well. I mean, right. Three disciplines. You've got the running, the swimming, the cycling. You swam as a child. I mean, had you done much cycling?
I had never cycled before in my life, except for sort of tooling around town on my old mountain bike. So that was different for me to sort of when I bought my first road bike and then I bought a triathlon bike. It's a very different kind of riding than I was ever used to. And I never really loved the cycling. It was sort of something to get through. But, I wanted to do triathlon and cycling's part of it. So I went ahead and just did it.
So how did you go about training for that? Did you get a coach involved? Did you, go on the internet to plan your training? Did you decide on what training you were going to do? How did you figure it out?
I did a lot of research on the internet, and I actually ended up buying a big book full of training plans, and I just found one that sort of looked like it would suit my abilities and religiously followed the training plan every time.
How easy was that to do? Being a stay-at-home mum, having 3 young children. I know you've obviously got a supportive husband, but how easy was it to find the time?
Well, sort of by the time I was doing the Ironman distance races, the kids were all in school. So I basically did all of my training while the kids were at school.
That must have been awesome. And have you got boys or girls?
I've got 3 daughters.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. So they must be looking at you like the Iron Mum, an inspiration with your running and triathlons and everything that you're doing.
Yeah, they're all grown now. They're 18, 21, and 23, and they're very big supporters. They come out to races and crew for me, and they're awesome.
From doing the Ironman, what did you enjoy most about doing that?
I just kind of liked. I don't even really know the answer to that. It's the challenge. It's why I do everything. It's the challenge. It's setting a goal, challenging myself with a goal that's usually pretty far outside my comfort zone and following through with it.
What makes you follow through? Where do you think you get that determination from?
Well, people say I'm stubborn. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's just something in my psyche that has to, I'm trying to prove something to myself, I think.
Yeah.
Every time. I'm not really sure.
And when you were out on, doing these Ironmans, was there a point where you felt as though you'd reached your limits, or had you not come to that point yet doing an Ironman?
No, I don't think so. The reason why I stopped doing triathlon is really I got burnt out on the cycling. So no, I think I could have gone further with it, but I didn't really want to. I was just kind of over it.
Tell us about your first ultra race then, because I believe you did it in California.
Yes. I signed up for a 50K in California and got out there. I was totally out of my element. I had no idea what to expect. It was much, much harder than I expected. In fact, I was dead last, and they kept the course open for me longer than the cutoff time. A sweeper ran me in. It was just unbelievable. I collapsed in the grass at the end.
Why was it harder than you thought it was going to be? Harder in what way?
It just took more of a toll on me than I thought. I because I'd never done anything like that before. I had no idea what to expect. It was hilly. It was hot. It just was outside my comfort zone. I'd never experienced anything like it before.
But you did it, and you finished it, and you completed it.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's amazing that they did, that they kept the course open for you and you got run in at the end. It sounds like it was, a very supportive course.
I find that generally with the with trail running and ultra running community, the race directors and people organizing the race are very supportive like that, and they will often do that for last runners.
I think it's so important because I know that can actually be a fear for many people, is the thought of, well, what happens if I'm last? I mean, did you have any of those thoughts?
Oh, all the time. Every time I go into a race, I say, what if I'm last? And, then it happened and I was last, and it didn't matter because even though I was last in the race, I finished it where, a good percent of people had dropped out that day. Many, many more never even started.
Yeah.
So I realized that coming last isn't that bad because somebody has to be last and you're still doing it.
I could not agree more. It's a huge achievement. 50, running your first ultra, running 50 kilometers. And, like you said, it was hilly, it was hot, but you persevered, you got through, you didn't drop out, but you did start and you finished it.
Yeah, I did.
Absolutely amazing. With running, what's going through your head when you're running? Do you listen to music? Do you listen to podcasts? Are you alone with your own thoughts?
I usually listen to music. When I'm on trails, I don't wear headphones because it just makes me feel a little too isolated when I'm out in the wilderness. So I have an iPod with a little speaker on it, and I play music. I don't tend to run with other people. I'm kind of a loner when I'm training. So yeah, I do listen to music, and I write blog posts in my head. I solve all my problems, figure out the way to fix the world. I get inside my head a lot just to pass the time, but I love being out there by myself. It's sort of my time, and the time passes very quickly.
I mean, what's your sort of like average training runs that you're going out on, especially when you're training for these big multi-stage ultras, which we're going to come on and discuss in a little bit?
Well, I build up to usually about 120 kilometers a week, broken down into 6 sessions, usually one long run and a couple of sort of medium distance runs, and then a few shorter ones. It just depends what the run is that I'm training for, how many hills I run, how the longest distance, whether I'm carrying a backpack. It really depends on what I'm actually training for.
So let's talk about one of the specific races that you've done, because you did the Ice Ultra, a 5-day multi-stage race, which is 230 kilometers above the Arctic Circle. Why did you decide on this race? How did you first hear about it?
Well, I heard about it because I had done another race from the same company. The company's called Beyond the Ultimate, and I had done their Jungle Ultra. And so I knew they had the Ice Ultra. So I decided to do the Ice Ultra because I hate the cold, and it would be super, super far outside my comfort zone. And it would just be a really big challenge for me.
So how long did you give yourself to prepare for this race?
I train year round with a pretty high training volume year round, but building up for that one, it was in February. So I probably started November, December, carrying the backpack, doing the cold weather stuff. I give myself usually a few months before a race to build up to it.
How do you train for a race like this? What are your tactics?
For that one in particular, I did a lot of cold weather stuff. I mean, I live in Canada, so I was lucky that I had snow and cold weather. I did quite a few long runs in the cold. My longest run was 8 hours, and it was minus 30 C that day. A lot of snow training. I slept out in the backyard in a tent when it was minus 28 to test my gear. it's just a lot of volume, really.
My mouth is open. I'm thinking 8 hours minus 30. Oh my goodness. And then,
Yeah.
I mean, mentally as well, I think sleeping in the garden when you can see your nice warm house and, maybe like a fire crackling and you're sort of shivering in the tent. But as you said, a great way to test out your gear and to see how you're getting on. So what did you learn throughout the training? What sort of things came up? How did you sort of change and adapt?
Well, obviously, clothing for that. It is important to have the right gear. So just every time I went out, I would tweak the gear a little bit, make sure I had the right clothing, the right shoes, the right socks. My biggest challenge for those training runs was keeping my water from freezing. So I had to figure something out for that as well.
Yeah, what did you do? How did you stop that?
Well, I just had to make sure to be drinking it often, if that makes sense. Just opening the bottle, shaking it up, keeping it agitated. And I did, and having insulated bottles. And I did manage to keep it enough unfrozen to drink out of. But just, the snacks, what snacks are going to work when it's freezing cold? Some of them are going to break your teeth when it's that cold. So just trial and error for everything.
And how do you protect your face? I mean, are you running? Because I'm just trying to picture it like if you're running with a balaclava, but then if you've got a balaclava, you're covering your mouth, then the breath coming out will probably freeze and then hit your face. How did you manage that?
It's kind of a layering system of buffs. So a buff around my neck that's pulled up over my chin, and then another one that's pulled sort of down. My cheeks were exposed, so I would put Vaseline on them to keep them from the weather a little bit. I did pretty good. During the race, there was on one day it was snowing and it was quite windy, and I got a terrible wind burn on my face. But other than that, I fared pretty well.
So I was going to say, I mean, let's go out to the actual race. There must have been incredible high points, but also incredible low points as well. I mean, what was a particular highlight for you from that race, from the Ice Ultra?
I think it came at the end of the long day, because these races typically have 4 sort of shorter days that aren't really that short, and then one long day. So there was an 80-kilometer day that ended with sort of knee-deep slush for 2 kilometers across this lake. And I was by myself the whole entire day, and it was my favorite day. Something about that day, because I was doing it and I was doing well. And then I came in across that slushy lake and I finished. It's incredibly empowering to set out to do something like that and then get to the end of it and say, I did it and I did it well.
Would you do it again? Because I know you said you hate the cold, but you've done all this incredible training, you've completed the race. Have you realized that actually you're never going to like the cold?
I'm never going to like the cold, and I probably won't do that one again.
But let's talk about the heat then, because another marathon that you've done, I think you like this one quite a lot, is it the Peru Ultra?
Yeah, it's called the Jungle Ultra.
Jungle Ultra, thank you.
Yeah, it's in the Amazon rainforest in Peru, and I've done it 4 times now.
Oh, fantastic. Tell us more about that. What is it about the race that you love?
Well, I love Peru. Peru is probably my favorite country to visit. I think I've been there 10 times now. And I like the jungle. That race is just really fun because there's so many different elements to it. There's the jungle is beautiful for starters, and the area of the jungle that it's in is quite mountainous. So there's hills, there's water crossings, there's animals, there's, the scenery is beautiful. It's self-supported again, and you sleep in a hammock. So you have to carry your hammock, and when you get into camp, you have to sling your hammock and get your food, and it's just really good fun.
Why do you keep going back to this race? Is it that you're trying to improve your time every time that you go? Are you trying to learn something new and different?
No, not at all. I just really love that race. It's probably, of all the races I've done, it's my favorite. And I can't stay away. I just keep going back because something just draws me to it year after year.
What's the most challenging aspect of the race for you?
Um,
I mean, or do you have any fears about the race now, or now that you've done it so many times, it's almost like, bring on the water, bring on the hills, bring on the jungle, bring on the animal, that I know how to deal with it.
Yeah, it's bring it all on now. The first time I did it, I was terrified before I started, and it was my first multi-stage race, and I really went into it thinking I wasn't going to finish it, but I did. And I loved it so much that I just had to go back and again.
We've talked about a little bit about your training, and do you work with a coach at all, or do you do all your own planning?
Yeah, I do all my own planning. I've never had a coach.
So you're doing all your own planning. You're picking these races which are taking you outside of your comfort zone. They are, they're going to challenge you physically, but they're also going to challenge you mentally, whether it's the fears or the anxiety before the race. And there's a lot to be said for the mental preparation that you can do before you go and put your body through something like the Jungle Ultra. For the mental side of things, what preparation do you do to get yourself ready?
I tend to be hyper organized, so I make lists and I pack and I repack and it's not much I can do to sort of prepare myself mentally for the event. Well, for the jungle I can, because I know what to expect, but for a new one that I've never gone to, I don't know what to expect, which causes me a lot of anxiety. So the best way I can deal with that is just to be as prepared as possible going into it, gear-wise, training-wise.
So when you stand on the start line, what's going through your head?
Just usually excitement at the start line. Usually by the time I get to the start line, I'm just ready to go.
And do you have a particular race strategy?
Not really. I'm slow and steady, and I just put one foot in front of the other.
But it obviously works though, which is good.
Yeah, it works for me, yeah.
So what about the long stage? Because running the long stage in the jungle must be quite challenging. So how do you make those cutoffs?
Well, I like to break it down. And the jungle is actually an easy one to break down because the terrain changes over the course of the long day. You've got some trail running, and then you have 50 river crossings in a row. Then you have the section where you're walking up the creek bed. Then you have a section on the road. Then you have the mountain. So it's pretty easy to break it down. So really, I just break it down checkpoint to checkpoint, section to section. And I know the cutoffs. I know I can make the cutoffs as long as I don't dilly-dally. I can make the cutoffs. So it's just a matter of breaking it down checkpoint to checkpoint, section to section, and not thinking too far ahead.
Absolutely. Being present is so powerful, because if you do start thinking too far ahead, it can get very, very overwhelming.
Yes, for sure.
With regards to the ice ultra that you did, you talked about how you trained for it. Luckily living in Canada, you've got access to all this snow and the cold, and you could camp outside in your garden at like minus 28 degrees. But obviously, with regards to training for the heat, what did you do to prepare yourself for that type of weather?
Well, I have a treadmill in my house, and I have made a little heat chamber around it. I've hung some tarps around it and put a heater inside it. And so in the weeks building up to a hot weather race, such as the jungle, I'm in there on my treadmill most days, sort of dressed for winter with the heaters on, going on the treadmill.
Oh, God, that sounds absolutely amazing.
It's really awful, actually.
Oh gosh, all like the sweating and everything else.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any like mantras or any sayings that you use?
I do. Just keep moving forward is my mantra. Really, I have it tattooed on my arm, and that's what I say to myself when the going gets rough.
And sorry, have you actually got it tattooed on your arm?
I do, yes.
Which arm, right or left?
It's on my left arm.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, that when I was doing my first Ironman, and I was terrified, and there's a lot of standing in line at registration and stuff at Ironman, and I was chatting with this woman in a lineup, and I was telling her how scared I was, and she said, "You'll be okay, just keep moving forward." So I took that to heart. And before the race, I took a Sharpie and wrote it on my arm. And I started doing that before all my races, writing "just keep moving forward" on my arm. And then a number of years ago, I hit kind of a rough patch in my life. And I was saying, just keep moving forward on a daily basis. And I decided to get it permanently tattooed onto my arm.
Oh, fantastic. What did your family say? Was that quite not a random thing? I'm just thinking if like my mum went and got a tattoo, I'd be like, Mum, oh my goodness.
They thought it was great.
But also, what a powerful reminder for you. Like every time you look down, when you see it, does it sort of inspire you again?
It does.
Fantastic.
Just not even just during races, but sort of anytime the going gets rough, it reminds me that that's the only way to go.
Yeah. I'd love to talk a little bit more about like your nutrition and your food and what you're eating. So you said initially when we first started talking, one of the reasons that you wanted to start running was to lose some weight. You'd had 3 children. You didn't feel that happy in your body and you're a little bit overweight. When it comes to your diet, and with all the training that you're doing, what are you eating, or what do you follow a particular diet?
I don't follow a particular diet. Most of the time, I'm pretty careful about what I eat because I do have a tendency to gain weight, even with all the training I do. So I eat a diet heavy on fruits and vegetables and lean proteins. I don't eat too many carbs. I do eat them, but not a lot. And then on the weekends, I tend to loosen up a little bit and I drink some wine and,
have a bit of balance.
Have a bit of balance. Exactly.
Do you have like a go-to piece of food when you're out doing these ultras that you sort of like you always have available?
I do, and it's candy.
Any particular type?
Oh, I like Twizzlers.
Do you know whatever gets you round? So you got a packet full of Twizzlers, amazing.
Yeah, and I save them for when I really need them.
No, but that can be good though, because it can almost be like rewarding yourself. Or the problem is that when I'm running, I might just be like, I deserve it. I'm just going to have it right now.
No, I carry other trail snacks too, but I always have some sort of candy for when the going gets really hard and I just need a boost.
Yeah. No, definitely. I love it. I mean, there's almost like there's a couple of other areas I'd love to sort of get your thoughts and opinion on, because you've done a lot of these races, especially with the Jungle Ultra. I've done the Marathon des Sables out in the desert, so slightly different from the Arctic and the jungle. But one of the big things is the feet, is trying to maintain your feet. And you said during the Jungle Ultra, at one point there's like 50 water crossings. So I can imagine your feet are getting very wet, and then there's So talk to me about how you manage your feet in those conditions.
Well, basically in the Jungle Ultra, your feet are basically wet from start to finish. I'm fairly lucky in that I don't have a tendency to get blisters. I do. One of my luxuries that I carry is a clean pair of socks for every day, which I think really helps with my feet because you get a lot of grit and dirt in your socks. And I just think having clean socks every day is helpful. I tend to lose toenails, but I don't tend to get blisters, and I'm just really lucky that way.
But I think if we ask people, what would you rather? Would you rather lose your toenails or would you rather get blisters? I think I'd be like, I'd lose all my toenails.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So for anybody listening who is thinking of going to do a Jungle Ultra, what would be your top tips for that race?
Train with your pack, practice with all your gear beforehand, and do a lot of hills.
Awesome. And what about for people who are doing the ice, the Arctic Ultra, the Ice Ultra? What would be your top tips for that race?
It's the same. Practice with all your gear, carry your pack, and if you don't live in a place that's cold, throw your food in the freezer to see how it's going to be when you pull it out to eat it.
That's a great idea. What did you find out doing that? I mean, how does chocolate work in the cold?
Chocolate works great. I took for the Ice Ultra, my main snack for while I was going was chocolate covered almonds.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, they were beautiful.
I was really worried that you were going to say no, chocolate just doesn't freeze that well, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh no,
Chocolate does well.
chocolate does well. That's good. I think everyone will be breathing a sigh of relief after that.
Sadly, the chocolate doesn't do well in the warm weather, though.
Oh my God, that's so true.
It's tragic.
Let's not think about that. Let's not think about that.
No.
So I'm not sure if have you run 100-miler?
I have attempted 100-miler 4 times.
So let's talk about this challenge then. So when did you start going after this 100-mile?
I think the first attempt I made was about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I made it 130 kilometers in, and then I tripped and injured myself. That was my first try.
Okay, so you got tripped in an injury, but you still did a huge distance.
Yeah. And then I've had 3 more attempts after that, and just for various reasons, they didn't work out. One of the times my brain gave up before my body. I talked myself out of it. Another time, my friend who had come to do it with me dropped out, and I just sort of, after 100 kilometers, I just didn't want to do it anymore. I guess my brain gave up that time too. And the 4th time, I don't even remember what happened.
Are you going to do it again? Is it still on your list?
It is. In fact, I just found out yesterday that I had been on a waiting list for a 100-miler, and I just found out yesterday that I got in.
Fantastic. So which 100-mile race is this?
It's called the Lost Soul Ultra. It's a local race, very hilly. It's actually the one that I failed on my first time, so I'm going back for some redemption.
So what are you going to do differently this time? I mean, have you thought about that? Or is that all you think about?
Well, I'm going to try not to trip. I just have to keep my head in the game. Because what happens when you're doing long distances like that is you start to, if you get inside your head too much, it's really, really easy to talk yourself out of it, because it is hard. Your body hurts. It's long, it's super easy to talk yourself out of it. So I'm just going to have to not get in my head like that. And I don't really have a strategy for that yet.
But it's interesting. When you say you're talking yourself out, what sort of things are you saying to yourself?
You're just saying, I don't want to do it anymore. I can't do it. It's too hard. My feet hurt, my this, my that. It's just, you get to a point where you just basically say, I don't want to be doing this anymore.
So how are you going to shut that down then and stop that negative voice coming out?
Well, I think I'm going to try and have a pacer for the last part of the race, which will help because it'll be just someone fresh to help keep me going. I never had that before. So I think that will help.
Awesome. And then, but what about the voices though, not getting in your head? I'm trying to figure out, like, how can you stop yourself getting in your own head?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's a matter of catching yourself, really. Catching yourself when you're saying I can't and turning it into I can, or like I said before, not sort of thinking too far ahead. Maybe just saying, I only have to go to the next checkpoint and then I can decide. And usually if you can make it to the next checkpoint, then you can say, yes, I can go. Or you'll have a crew there that will say, yes, you can go. It's tricky.
Yeah. I mean, how many checkpoints will there be on a sort of 100-mile race?
This one actually has quite a few checkpoints. I think there will be 12, maybe, something like that. And they're not that far apart, which kind of make it, in a way, it makes it harder because there's more opportunity to drop out. But in another way, it makes it easier because you're seeing your crew more often.
Yeah. It's an interesting name for the ultra that you're going after, isn't it? The Lost Soul Ultra.
Yeah.
Do you know why it was named that?
I don't know why it was named that. It's a very hard race. It has a 100K component as well, which I've completed several times. It's a very hard race. It would be really easy to lose yourself out there.
Yeah. Carolin, I noticed one of your most recent blog posts that you've written is about mental illness. Would you be happy to talk about that on the podcast?
Sure.
Fabulous. Would you just like to almost just share a little bit more about why you decided to blog about this?
Sure. Well, I have had that blog post going around in my head for quite a while. I do suffer from anxiety and depression, and I know quite a few other people who are also battling that. And there's still such a stigma attached to it, even though people talk about it more. It's still a very secretive condition. You don't want people to know because there is still stigma attached. And I just feel like it's important to talk about it, that the more we talk about it, the less stigma will be attached and the more people will be sort of willing to get help for their conditions.
Absolutely. No, absolutely 100%. I think it's so incredibly brave what you've written, talking about your feeling. I mean, how did you feel after you shared it?
I was terrified after I shared it, but then I've had so much positive feedback. I can't even believe how much positive feedback I've had from people emailing me, messaging me, phoning me. I was at a race last weekend and strangers were coming up to me and saying, I read your blog, which was just incredible to me. The feedback has been just so beautiful.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think that is absolutely fantastic because there are so many people out there who are going through the same things, but they don't necessarily know how to communicate it. They don't know how to ask for help. They don't know what the next steps are for them. How have you found running? Have you found that that's helped you?
Absolutely. It's helped me. It really has helped me. It's an outlet for everything really, but even when I'm in the depths of depression, I still make a big effort to get out and run because I know it will boost my mood, if only for a little while. And for anxiety, it's a godsend really, because it gets out all that, all that negative energy that builds up inside you when you have anxiety, and you can get out there. And even if the results are short-lived, which sometimes you only feel better while you're running, but it still is it's a release.
Absolutely. I mean, running is an incredible thing for either taking your mind off things, like problem solving. And sometimes, I mean, I know that I can do this, which is it can be very easy to make almost the easy decision to, like, for me, get back into bed, pull my laptop up, put Netflix on, box of chocolates, and I think I'm in my happy place, but actually sometimes that's not actually happening. I mean, can you try and describe how running helps you?
It gets those endorphins going, which is good for everything. And some days that's the only time I leave the house is to go for a run. It gets me out of the house. It takes my mind off whatever has been weighing on me. It helps me think things through, have some clarity, and it just makes me feel better.
Do you do anything else to sort of look after yourself in terms of like self-care? Is there anything else that you do?
At times I journal. It depends where I sort of am feeling. So when I am depressed or having a particularly anxious time, I do some journaling. I'm not a very social person, so I don't tend to talk to people about it. I'm more introspective, so the journaling helps get some thoughts out. Really, that's all.
You said in your blog post that you've got a running away from home bag. Can you just
I do.
Can you just explain what that is?
I can. Well, the fight or flight mechanism is very strong with me, and my inclination is always for flight. So when things get bad, I feel like running away from home. So part of my self-care is to have this little bag with my keys, my credit card, my driver's license, and some money, and I keep it in my purse at all times. And my kids started calling it my running away from home bag, because one time I said, yeah, that's in case I ever decide to run away from home. So it just sort of, it's kind of silly, but it just makes me feel better having all those things in one place. And I also have an envelope full of cash that I just keep stashed away. That's my running away from home money. And, I don't think I'm ever going to act on it, but just having it is something that makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah. Gives you a level of comfort. I understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Carolin, you're training for the 100-mile ultra. Have you got any other races coming up? Will you be doing the Jungle Ultra again?
I was at the Jungle in June, and I was actually fastest lady this time. So I was super happy about that.
Congratulations. That's absolutely incredible. Well done.
Thank you. And actually in just 2 weeks from now, I'm heading to Kenya for another 5-day self-supported ultra. It's called the For Rangers Ultra, and it's about 220 kilometers over 5 days through various game reserves in Kenya to raise money for the rangers that put their lives on the line every day to help keep the animals safe in Kenya.
Oh, fantastic. I was going to say, any more? You sound like you've got brilliant race after brilliant race coming up.
That's all I have so far.
So far, that's okay. That's enough. You got some big challenges coming up.
Yeah, for sure.
But Carolin, if people want to follow along, read more from your blog or follow you on social media, where's the best place for them to go?
They can find me on Facebook. I have an athlete page called Accidental Ultra Runner on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Carolin Botterill is my name on Instagram. And I have my blog. It's on WordPress, Accidental Ultra Runner blog. And
Carolin, I'll make sure that I put all of the links to your blog, to your Facebook, to your Instagram page on the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com. But before we go, I would love for you to leave just some final words of advice for other women out there who are maybe going through some tough times and they're just looking for some words of inspiration to get them through it.
Well, what I always tell people who are going through tough times is, first and foremost, be kind to yourself. Give yourself a break. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be everything to everyone. Do something for yourself and be nice to yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And those are just wonderful words to finish the podcast on. Carolin, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more about your journey of becoming an accidental ultra runner. Absolutely inspiring. And thank you for being so open and honest about your anxiety and depression and what you've been going through. I think it's so brave of you to share that.
Thank you.
And I love your words, be kind to yourself. We all need to be kind to ourselves.
We do.
So massive thank you, Carolin. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
A massive thank you to Carolin for coming on and sharing more about her running journey and what she's accomplished and how it's impacted on her. I will be sharing all of the information that she's talked about, so links to the different races, the Ice Ultra and the Jungle Ultra, as well as links to her blog post and her social media accounts at toughgirlchallenges.com. If you go to the website, on the website you can find all of our previous guests going back to 2015. There's now this is episode 181, so over 180 episodes, which is incredible. If you go and look in the show notes, in the blog, you can see all of the show notes for all of the episode, and that basically gives you more of a bio about the woman that we've spoken to. It gives you more of a detailed breakdown about what we discuss in each podcast episode, and then at the end with links to all of her social media accounts, where if she's written a book, links to their books, etc. So that's toughgirlchallenges.com. Next week we're going to be speaking to Bettina and Kat from Aurora Wild Women, who share more about what Aurora Wild Women is, how they started it, what the purpose is, and what their mission is. Really fascinating episode. Then on the 11th of December, we're going to be speaking to Keegan Randall, who is a 5-time Olympian who won a gold medal for cross-country skiing this year. She's also recently being diagnosed with breast cancer. Again, a very, very fascinating episode. We're then going to be speaking with Ali Bailey on the 18th of December, all about running. So Ali is a British ultra runner who would describe herself as a mid-pack runner, but lots of top tip, loads of great great piece of advice. But basically, I've interviewed female adventurers, explorers, runners, triathletes, swimmers, women who've climbed the highest mountain in the world, who've sailed around the world, who've rowed across oceans, who've ran the length of countries, who've run across Africa, who've gone from the couch to running the London Marathon. There's a whole variety of women I've interviewed, from a 14-year-old weightlifting champion from New York to a 70-year-old grandmother who has flown around the world. So there's a massive, massive spectrum, all different ages, all different stories. I think it's incredibly powerful to be able to get these stories out there. One of the reasons that I do what I do is to absolutely, obviously to motivate and inspire you to take action in your own personal life and to step outside your comfort zone. But it's also about increasing the amount of female role models in the media, because I'm a big believer that if you can see somebody else doing it, then you can look at them and think, well, if she can do it, then why can't I do it? What's stopping you? And I think that can be so, so powerful. This is the mission that I'm on. If you want to help support the mission, then please sign up to become a patron, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. This is how I keep the podcast sponsorship free. It is funded by you, the listener. There's over 200 patrons now supporting the podcast every single month. And it makes such a huge difference, because it allows me to start paying myself, a wage. And trust me, I'm not doing this for the money, because I did this for 2 and a bit years while going to debt. I was living with, maybe I am living with my parents, but basically I was 36 years old. I still am 37 years old now. 37 years old, living with my parents, or was living with my parents, before I embarked on my next challenge, which is to cycle from Vancouver down to Mexico. So this is very much a passion project, something I am incredibly motivated about. But if you would like to support as well, if you'd like to encourage more women to get fit and active, to travel and explore, to challenge themselves, then do sign up to become a patron, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. New episodes come out every Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time. You can also follow along on all of our social media channels. I am on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and I've obviously talked about the website as well. But have an incredible day wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Give it your all, give it 110%. Take action. Do one thing today which is going to take you closer to your dream. Start taking the first step, because that's how you start building momentum. All right, take care. Lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.